there is no how our educational system can give us the right balance or give the young people the right balance that they need to thrive and succeed, even in Nigeria. There's no country can successfully thrive in the global market without international education. So African students need that exposure. They need the international education. They need the experiences as well for other countries. They also need to then help things work in a lot of the Western systems so they can, properly acquire, bring it back and improve things, especially the African landscape. International education is very necessary for Africa or for Africa's development. Back in the days of them, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Awolowo, and the rest of them, most of them were scholarship students abroad. They came back to Nigeria. They were given opportunities to work as lecturers in universities and things like that, giving government opportunities. They were the one that we put our system.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Relocation Room. And with me is an honorable guest. I'm very excited to have him here. He had a lot of challenges getting here, but we're very, very happy. Thank you, Mr. Victor, for um giving us your presence here. So, on today in the relocation room, we're going to be talking about the future of international education for African students, right? Because there's a lot of demand for studying abroad. So, based on this demand, what does that future look like for African students, for Nigerian students? But before we dive right into it, let's talk a little bit about your history in the study abroad space, sir.
Okay. My name is Victor Ikpe. I funded known as Victor Ikpe. I've been in the international education space for about 9 years now. I started off as a counselor, student support counselor back in the days with a company called Preparation for Life. Progressed from there, worked as a student consultant for other organizations as well. And then I joined an organization called Oxford International, where I was looking after the North American market for them. And currently, I'm the regional director, West Africa, for the biggest educational party provider
Yeah, that's
in the world, Navitas
yes.
PTY Limited. Yeah, the best.
That's a very progressive career trajectory. And I'm very happy that you're here because now you guys get to listen from a professional with true life experiences. So we'll start with the first question. The future of international education. So, sir, as global education continues to evolve, what do you believe the future of international education looks like or will look like for African students or Nigerian students in the next 5 to 10 years, seeing how all these new policies and everything is, going on?
Um, to be honest, there's been a lot of shift in migration policy and immigration focus lately. There's also been a lot of, should I say, a lot of countries are beginning to slow down on the intake of student migration. We saw that started out with Australia at some point, and then we had the ban with the US when Trump came in, which has significantly affected that particular recruitment opportunity for students for the US and Canada as well. In the past 2 years, we've seen a reduced amount of visa approval rates for Canada, and then of course, the UK now is coming up with strict measures for their student visa process. So a lot of things are changing. Some people would say transnational education is the future. A lot of organizations are looking to coming to Africa to invest, in education in Africa, rather than to bring the education to students in Africa, rather than taking students out of Africa.
I see.
Yeah, just to mitigate a lot of the challenges that we've had over the years as well. But so far, I would still say it's stable. The immigration landscape, the student immigration landscape is still stable. We still have a good number of students chasing their dream of studying overseas in different countries. And the next 10 years, we'll definitely see a lot of shift. We'll definitely see a lot of changes with immigration policy. Yeah. We will expect the most stricter measures for students.
Yeah, I have a genuine question, bro. Is it because when they go there, they start to behave differently? Could that be why? Because from where I stand, right, um, I'm seeing more of negative news than positive news. So is it because when we go there, we start to misbehave? And if that's the case, why?
Definitely. The negativity always outweighs positivity in terms of impact. So there has been a lot of negative impacts from African students in the UK and in the US and in Canada and there's other countries as well in Oceania. However, it's not just an African problem; it's also a global problem. We've had Asian students as well that's had negative impact. We also had, students from the Middle East as well that's had negative impact. So it's not just Africans. But then, um, to answer your question directly, yes, it's been a huge contributor to the measures we are seeing today. We've we're, we've had cases where students go to school and they end up taking job opportunities and not turning up in school. Had issues where students cannot afford to pay their tuition fees when they arrive, in those countries. Uh, also had issues where, students have engaged in a lot of unscrupulous activities and negatively impacted the society they find themselves in. Which takes the focus away from the primary objective of why you're going to study overseas, which is to gain international education, international experience, and then, of course, use that international experience and exposure to better your life and, the society back home. But in recent time, that has been misinterpreted.
There was the way
Okay,
forward.
we went forward in terms of
Based off of this now, um, because it also leads to a second question that we wanted to ask. Brain drain, right? Many people argue that studying abroad has contributed to Nigeria's brain drain. So most of the intelligent persons are going, and then they are leaving the rest persons here. So while others see this as an opportunity for global exposure, what's your perspective in terms of how our finest are leaving the country to go study there? Then,
well, brain drain, brain gain. It's always a matter of perspective.
okay.
People always say when people travel abroad or when people advance for international education, uh, they end up staying in the countries using that knowledge to better. But the real question should be what is the alternative for them? What's the alternative for them back home? I'm a product of international education myself. I studied my first degree in the UK, and
Makes sense.
yeah, and I understand the challenges on both sides. You know, um, because when I came back home after my studies, I knew the challenges I faced in trying to secure something reasonable. I knew what I had. I mean, when I did my internship during my study in the UK, I worked for a top multinational company, not going to work during company I did my internship. And working there, in a space of 3 months, I became a project manager. So finishing that, coming back home, I understand the challenges too. That you go into the pool and you're struggling to find something reasonable for yourself alongside other graduates from the Nigerian educational system as well. So it's not a question of from the side of the government, yes, it's a brain drain, but then what alternative has the government provided for those students? What alternative have they made available for them in terms of providing them with the right resources or the right, job opportunities for them to come out from technically fat in the society. So for me, I think on an individual perspective, when someone invests in international education for themselves, or when their family invests in international education for themselves, they want the best possible outcome out of the investment. And any way they can get the best possible outcome for themselves, they would pursue that. But if the government wants to reduce brain drain, then they have to put lots of measures in place to ensure that a lot of these students are, actively catered for, or opportunities are there for them to utilize the knowledge, experience, and exposure they gain from studying abroad. So it's a matter of perspective.
Which also leads me to this next question. When you mentioned the government, so I want to ask about government scholarship challenges, because we've seen several cases where students on government-sponsored scholarships are left stranded abroad due to delayed funding or abandoned scholarship commitment. So, what impact does this have on students, and what reforms are needed to prevent this from happening?
It's terrible. It's terrible impact. I was a victim of that as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nigeria.
So, I'll give a bit of background. So I was a sponsored student by Rivers State government in 2011 to go study in the UK alongside some of my friends now back in the days. It was a brilliant model. It was a brilliant initiative. The Rivers State Sustainable Development Agency, then as it was called, set up by the previous governor of Rivers State, His Excellency Governor Otini Chibikanich. Brilliant guy, brilliant idea. It was fantastic. We were about over 100 students then, selected. It was purely on merit. We wrote exams. I remember then I tried for like 2 or 3 times to get a scholarship. It was difficult. I think the third time I wrote the exam, I was top person from my local government. And then it was even just 2 of us then were picked from my local government. So it was quite competitive, right? And it was the best of the best. We had one of the finest set of students you could ever imagine, from engineering to medicine.
You sound like you enjoyed the conference. Are you sure?
Oh, he was. Yeah, I met some of the most brilliant people, I know today that are my friends in that in particular initiative. But along the line, when the next government came in, we all know who, I don't want to mention it. And he came and, he refused to fund the program at some point, which left a lot of students stranded at the time. I remember then it was a very terrible issue. We protested in London, did a lot of protests in London back in the days. The governor then came to Chatham House in London and gave a speech and said, we're coming to the UK to study courses like law, other chivalrous courses that we could be studying back home in universities like UST, Nairobi. But to tell you, shockingly, I was surprised lately that this same governor was celebrating his son graduating from the same law school in the UK. Having abandoned, lots of students. It was terrible. We lost about 20-something medical students that were studying in the Caribbean. Some of my friends that were medical students in Europe, if we there should be at least 11 students,
Huh.
medical students that we lost to countries in Europe now that are living, working in Europe currently,
Yeah.
because of that,
Thing.
silly decision. And some other people are scattered across different parts of the world, and we also lost a girl during that whole debacle. Fate. She came back home during the time to try to seek support from her family and friends so she can go continue her studies in the UK. And eventually she was shot by armed robbers, along a Yahoda road trying to get back home. It was terrible. I couldn't even attend the funeral that because it was one of the most painful things I've had to experience in my life because she was breathing. I mean, these are brilliant students that were, outstanding. They didn't ask for it. They didn't, they didn't even beg for it. It was a government initiative and it was a mess. Some of us picked up the pieces, moved on with our lives, continued the education, and we are contributing the best that we can to Nigeria as a whole. And we've tried to remain as responsible as possible. I mean, I have some very good friends from that scholarship initiative that are doing so well. Like a friend of mine, Maxwell, now works with NMPC, brilliant guy, had a first class with UCL London. Have another friend, Chika, as well, who works with NMPC, brilliant civil engineer as well from the UK.
See, that's what we asked about the brain drain. See, all our brilliant minds are going there.
No, I mean, they are in Nigeria. They are working in Nigerian organizations, making the impact they could. Of course, myself. But then, which takes me back to my previous point, it's individual perspective. Some of us are strong enough to stay in the system, fight the system, overcome the challenges, and make the most of the system that we can. Some others too do not have the patience to do that. And you can't blame them. The hundreds of our students from the scholarship are scattered across Europe and different parts of the world, even in US as well. From that scholarship initiative, we have about at least 5 PhD holders in the US that are my friends with scholarship that are, doing excellent research exploits in the US. You won't blame them, because when you're faced with such negativity, and I'm trying to find the right words, but for me, I would say stupid policies from
What would you
governments
advise
and individuals.
if you were in the government's house? What kind of policy? What would you do differently, or advise the government to do differently regarding this leaving them stranded? Thank you for watching the show. So my name is Dennis and I'm a payment consultant with the Relocation Room. And what we simply do is we help our study abroad partners help you make your payments to your international school. And the advantage is that we help them save at least 80 to 150,000 naira plus on whatever payment that they need to make. So for you watching right now, if you're a student looking to make payment for your study abroad, tuition, IHS, visa, accommodation, living expense, no problem. Send us a DM, call the number on your screen, or send an email, and we'll send you a free quote. And one thing I can assure you is that your payment will help you save nothing less than 80 to 150,000 naira plus on whatever amount you need to pay to your school. So we look forward to hearing from you. Peace.
I mean, it's clear as black and white. It's clear as black and white. I mean, even at the time when the governor in question made the decision, most times I wonder who even advises them for these decisions. Who even it's crazy, but you try to wonder what goes through their mind because it's stupidity. Because if you look at the previous year, I think one of the biggest challenges, right, Nigeria has is politics and the endpoints of politics or the effect of politics. Because sometimes we play politics too much. that it overshadows
The purpose.
policy implementations and government transitional purposes. Because if you look at the previous year, when Governor Rotimi Amechi was in government, the first set of students that graduated from the scholarship, we had about 400 doctors that came back into the country. He built health centers for them that they were all giving jobs. He bought them cars, integrated them into the system. And so you see, that was a system that worked. And then fast forward to the next government. So you're now wondering, okay, whatever the politics were existing at the time, why couldn't you take out the politics and look at the benefit and the impact of the scholarship at the time from the previous government and just walk through the system there? So it's not always a question of what should they do. It's the things they should do are obvious. It's what even baffles me and the rest of Nigerians is why they choose not to do.
Why they choose not to do.
Because there is no how our educational system can give us the right balance or give the young people the right balance that they need to thrive and succeed, even in Nigeria. Back in the days of them, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Awolowo, and the rest of them, most of them were scholarship students abroad. They came back to Nigeria. They were given opportunities to work as lecturers in universities and things like that, giving government opportunities. They really want to reform their system. Diaspora education is important for any country. When I was in the UK doing undergraduate, we had a lot of Chinese students in our universities. I used to ask them, why do we have so much of the guy? And they said, we're just coming here, to learn and go back to our home country to impact, because you have to learn what other societies are doing. I used to ask them, why were there, so much in the country? And, they said, a lot of them were government scholarships, private company scholarships to come to learn specific courses, specific modules that they need to take care of as to improve their company in their government. So it's important, because there are a lot of societies that are advanced in the world in terms of operations, in terms of, systems, mechanisms, companies like, some countries, whether in Europe, like Germany, as well. We are very quite advanced in technology. So when students go to study in countries like Germany, they are learning, definitely good things, that will impact their society back home. The US as well is very fantastic with IT, IT and healthcare in the US. The UK as well, healthcare, engineering, medicine. These are some fantastic countries that have very advanced technologies and systems when it comes to certain subjects. So diaspora education is important. Every country needs to invest in diaspora education. So that they can have the right balance of students. I'm not saying educational system in the country is not good enough or it cannot produce excellent students, but they have to be the right balance. They have to be the right balance. You need people from homegrown educated students. You also need foreign educated students, so that they can be a right balance of experience, educational differences, as well as exposure as well. But the scholarship thing has been terrible.
All right, sir. So we have few more questions for you, sir. Just from your own perspective, can studying abroad actually become a solution to Africa's development challenges, rather than contributing to brain drain? Like, what was your opinion on that?
Yeah, definitely. Just the way I highlighted in my previous comment, diaspora education is very important for any countries to develop, and this is something that countries have invested in for years. India, China, and a lot of the Middle East countries invest in diaspora education. So there's no country can successfully thrive in the global market without international education. So African students need that exposure. They need the international education they need the experience as well from other countries. They also need to learn how things work in hockey, a lot of the Western systems, so they can, properly bring it back and improve things within the African landscape. So international education is very necessary for Africa, or for Africa's development as a whole, in almost every dimension.
Okay. And lastly, before we let you go, so what is your advice for African students who right now are considering studying abroad? So what would you say to them? What should they be looking out for and all of those?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest thing to consider when studying abroad is, first of all, you need to be able to understand what your objectives are, study objectives, and it starts with the foundation. Okay, what's your foundation in school? Are you going into health, social sciences, engineering, medicine? And then once you've defined the subject you're going for, and then it also depends on your level of education, postgraduate, undergraduate as well. You find a course that suits your objective, and it has to be something you really have a passion for and something you really want to get the right training for. And then after that, you now seek for professional advice and you find a good organization to help you, um, in achieving that educational dream objective. Just as we do in my organizations, Navitas PTY Limited, we are a global educational provider. We're in several countries across the world, and we have pathway solutions for students for the US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East, UAE, Indonesia, and as well as Sri Lanka. So we do have a lot of pathways. So companies like Navitas, are available to provide students with the right platform, to begin their international education journey, guide them through the entire process, provide them with the right institutions. We work with a lot of educational institutions too, across the world, where we place students in various countries. We have a lot of universities and colleges in the various countries, including Europe as well, Germany and Netherlands, where we place students in. So student works with companies, organizations like Navitas. They are sure of the right support, the right guidance, and they have a team in place in Africa, that provides that, support for students. And we also have a range of partners as well, across different countries in Africa, West Africa, whose responsibility is to ensure that students get the right access to, it's international education opportunities.
All right. Thank you very much. It has been a swell time. And also for you, viewers, I'm going to leave Mr. Victor's email address in the comment section so you can request a consultation, right? That's how it works for you. So you send an email to request a one-on-one, and all the information you need, you will definitely get it. So thank you very much once again, Mr. Victor. It's a pleasure having you here. So till next time, bye.